Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having an amazing day today. Today we're taking a look at the short story, The Will of Stanley Brooke. It's about 7 pages in my cult print collection by Ramsey Campbell that was published in the mid-60s. It's only about 7 pages long. It didn't take me more than 11 or 12 minutes for me to knock it out last night for the second time while doing a deep dive in this book for you folks that we've been doing of Ramsey Campbell. Now, Ramsey Campbell is a big name in the horror genres, particularly in the UK. He's written novels like this one by Midnight Sun that I've read. That was published in the 80s, and he's very prolific in the horror genre, and he has developed a craft after starting writing in the early 60s, and just was doing horror only, and he's developed his craft after decades of writing, and has turned from just a horror writer into more of a, his stuff has a horror tone to it too, sure, but it has this sense of wonder and awesomeness as you're reading it, much like Algernon Blackwood's best works, like The Willows did, for example, which is considered by myself and H.P. Lovecraft to be the best horror short story of all time, or H.P. Lovecraft in his later works in the 30s. So that's, he's somebody that definitely did those sorts of things. Ramsey Campbell now is just writing horror stuff, though, and this short story is pretty short. I'm only giving it a 7 out of 10. It's gripping, but it doesn't have anything as a surprise or something new to say to the genre. It is in my Cthulhu Mythos collection, but I don't recall any Cthulhu Mythos stories in it, so your mileage may vary as to whether or not it actually is in the Cthulhu Mythos. As a reminder, the Cthulhu Mythos is a shared universe that was created by H.P. Lovecraft, reusing elements from previous stories in future ones like the Necronomicon, or some of his characters, which is a book, or some of his characters and bad guys, in a short story called The Call of Cthulhu. It's generally considered to be sort of the beginning of the modern era, the Call of the Cthulhu Mythos, if you will. He has previous elements from previous short stories that he uses that are introduced into that, as well as he'll continue to use elements again and again and again, like in The Hound. But that's sort of the beginning. Then he'll begin to bring in elements from his friends and co-writers for a magazine in the pulp era called Weird Tales that he will be doing a whole lot of sharing. And so in that first generation, up to the end of the 30s when he dies, and then a couple of years after his death, I call that Generation 1. And then I think that Generation 2 begins right around 1940, and then finishes right around 1960 or 65. So this is being published right around 64, 65, so it's at the end of Generation 2, which is being run by Lovecraft's, one of his sort of folks that he really sort of, took under his wing, called August Derleth. And so he's reading this. And so Ramsey Campbell has submitted the first short story in this collection, The Church at High Street, to Ramsey Campbell as a teenager. It was published in 62, and this is a few years later with The Will that we're reading now. He's published a lot of stuff, so he really loved this stuff, and so his earlier stuff feels more like he's trying to mimic Lovecraft's style or voice without really sort of mastering Lovecraft, sort of, his contexts, right, and so forth. Lovecraft, he pushed his Cthulhu Mythos without ever sort of revealing what was happening in a massive way, right? So so he would keep things secret and hidden, which is something that Generation 2 with August Derleth really pushed aside, and then Lynn Carter really sort of led the next one, Generation 3, with his editings and his republications as editor, and also his writing too. I consider him sort of the leader in Generation 3. Really removed the walls that were hiding what was really happening, and then the fourth generation, which I think begins right around 1980. Which is what we're currently living in right now, really goes back to basics in a lot of things, and each of the works can definitely feel very, very different. So that's sort of the era. So this is, I think, written again near the end of Generation 2 of the Cthulhu Mythos, in case you care. This is nice, it's fun. I keep my reviews spoiler-free as a reminder, so I'm not going to give you the spoiler as to what happens. I don't want to take too much of your time, because, again, this is a 12-minute read, right? It's not going to take that much of your time, so I don't want to spend a lot of time reviewing it. But again, this is a nice short story in the collection Cold Print, which we've been doing a deep dive into. I bought this. This is published in the 90s as a collection of his stuff. It was republished a couple of years later. This is the republished that I bought on Amazon. I'll link you to it in the comments below in case you're interested in buying it and following along with me in this collection that we'll be doing a deep dive into in the month of October that I dedicate to the Cthulhu Mythos. But basically what's happening in this short story we find out in the first couple of pages is that there's somebody who has some money, and he's been diagnosed with a terminal disease. So he has a will where his family share £1,000. Have £1,000 given to each of them, and then a niece who's been taking care of him, he's giving the house to. So that's sort of the will. But we're going to find out on page 2 that he is changing his will, and then what will happen as a result of that. Changing from sort of a traditional will where all of his family are each getting £1,000, and then this house is going to his niece, which has been taking care of him, to something very, very different. And that's sort of the beginning of this, sort of the descent into the horror side of this short story. So there you are. That's the will for you. So I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read the will? What'd you think about it? Would you like to talk about it in the comments below? Do you think it was better or worse than a 7 out of 10? Would you like to talk about spoilers? Let's do it. If you enjoyed this video, hey, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are going on in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.